Welcome into Kitchen Talk Pickleball Edition. I'm your host, Caitlin Miller, and this week joining us is Ryan Van Winkle. He's the CEO and co-founder of Bounce. Ryan, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, Caitlin, thanks for having me. I've seen quite a few episodes, so it's cool to be on myself this time.
Yes, and so Ryan, you're based out of New York. You've created this awesome software called Bounce, where you guys have coaching now. You're about to launch an online coaching platform too as part
Mhm.
of it. So, I mean, tell me a little bit, Ryan, about how you got started with Bounce and kind of how it's evolved since.
Yeah, definitely. So my journey into pickleball is similar to a lot of people's in that I started off in some different racket sports. Historically, I played a lot of tennis. I love tennis. I still play. I had the opportunity to live in Europe for a while as well, and I saw the padel boom. So I don't know if you've ever gotten to play padel or
No,
if
I
it's
want to though.
oh, not yet. Oh, it's so much fun. Obviously, adds a different dynamic into the sport since you can play off of the back wall and things like that. It's mostly, or I think explicitly doubles focus, so that's fun as well, where most of the pickleball is.
Yep.
So anyway, I saw the rise of that, and that was crazy. And then when I came back to the US a few years ago is when pickleball really started to take off. And I played pickleball, didn't know how serious I'd be about it. 30 minutes in, loved it like everyone else. So I kept playing. But one of the issues that I had with the sport since I started playing a lot, let's say after college, was that it was really, really, really hard to get connected into a community, finding players to play with, whether it was the time of day or the skill level. And on the other side of that, I also found it annoying to find proper coaching or instruction in general because I learned tennis quite late, so I had to put a lot of energy into learning, which means I learned padel even later, and then pickleball even later. And I had a hard time with this, and ultimately just thought it was annoying that there wasn't one place to be able to go figure this stuff out. So I ended up teaming up with a childhood friend of mine, actually, and we put our heads together and said, why don't we just try to build something ourselves that solves a lot of these problems at the grassroots level for racket sports? And where we really honed in, which is what you alluded to earlier, was how do we build something to connect coaches and players specifically within the pickleball space? So for coaches, that means an entire suite of business tools, which we could talk about later. And then for players, that means obviously connecting them with those coaches, but then giving them ways to track the data. Where do you spend your time in lessons? What insights did you learn? Can you revisit some of the things that you learned last year whenever you're struggling with your drops again? And just trying to create like a much better experience for both sides and ultimately get more people into the sport.
I love that. And it's so true because I think pickleball is such a new space. So, like tennis, you grew up, or I grew up taking a bunch of lessons,
Right.
clinics, all of this stuff. And then with pickleball, it's like I've progressed. I think I've taken like one lesson my entire
Wow.
time playing and like made my way. I'll do 5-0 tournaments, but it's weird. Like I watch a lot of like YouTube or like try to learn from the pros and stuff like that. But it is one of those sports where like the coaching space, I feel like is a lot newer. And a lot of the
Mhm.
amateurs I know haven't taken many lessons, but they want to, or they're like stagnant and they want to grow their game. So it's
Right.
awesome. And I was seeing some of the tools you have for, people who want to use Bounce. You guys have like, what are your strengths, right? Like coach ratings, all that stuff to kind of help, like you said, with that progress to make sure whatever you are learning from your coaches, you're actually working on yourself.
Definitely. So there are a couple things that we want to do for players or and coaches as well, and one of those is allowing the coaches to differentiate themselves. I think it's really important to give players the variety to be able to choose based on what's important to them. So, for example, something important to me might be that the coach has 20 years experience being on the court. I know they've been through the trenches a lot of times and they can give me a lot of wisdom, so to speak. Something else that's important, particularly for players that are at a really high level like you, is I want to know the coach's duper rating or UTRP rating, whatever it might be, because I really want to know that they can play at a high level. So we're trying to give coaches ways to differentiate themselves based on what they think is important, which then gives players a lot better choice on the marketplace of coaches. And then, as you said, in the lesson itself, whether it be an on-court lesson or it be a remote lesson, there's a way where the coach and player can reflect on that lesson to talk about what they worked on, what I thought Caitlin's strengths were, what were her weaknesses, what are some drills I'd want to do next time. And you'd get a similar experience, Caitlin, where you could say, this is how I felt on the court. Here's where I think I'm doing well. Here's where I think I'm struggling. And now over time, you almost have this memory between you and the coach that you can always reference on your profile to inform future lessons or to recall what you've worked on in past lessons. And it just becomes this like memory bank so that you don't have to watch as many YouTube videos if you want to reach the 5.0 level.
That's awesome. And two, from the, coaching perspective, because I know a few people, in the Nashville area and beyond that coach, but for me, when I was doing that, I unfortunately don't have that much time anymore, but I was literally just like posting on a Nashville pickleball page, like, hey,
Sure.
I'm a certified instructor offering lessons. But now through your platform, it makes it super easy, right? For coaches to, work with their clients and kind of, yeah, give almost like a resume too, I guess, behind yourself.
Yeah, that's actually a good way to explain it. I've never used that language. I'll have to steal that from you. Yeah, that's so one of the things we wanted to do is, kind of in a kind of straightforward, it feels like Airbnb for coaches. So we wanted to make sure that we can give every single coach their own, like pretty much their own personal website or a resume, as you said. And then they're able to just link that in their social bios or put it into some of the groups where they know they have a lot of pickleball activity, like you said, maybe a Facebook group or Discord or what's this one that's
I know
Team
it's hard
Reach.
to, okay, there's
There's
so
so many.
many
That's
now, like Slack, yeah.
Yeah, Slack. There are just so many communities where you see a lot of players requesting lessons, or you have coaches before leaving their phone number. Now they can just drop a link into their booking page, and players can go and book that for whatever the coach is free because the coach can set their whole schedule and payments through that. So it has made the accessibility a little bit easier, and then it saves a lot of back and forth in group messages where everyone else thinks it's like kind of spammy. Like, Kaylin, we don't need to talk in the Facebook group about when you're available and what court you can coach at. We could do that somewhere else. So it's made it a bit easier.
And even like everything, like, payments, right? You can just go through the app instead of, let's say, Venmo or cash. Like, I feel like it's like a one-stop shop for everything.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. So there were a few big challenges that we learned when we were interviewing the dozens of coaches to build it. One of them was payment. If you're particularly an independent coach and you're not, salaried at a club, which are most coaches in racket sports, you'd ask, well, how do you handle payments on your coaching business? And they would say, well, it's just a combination of cash, Cash App, Zelle, Venmo, and sometimes I'll just give 10 lessons and they'll just send me a wire transfer after 2 months. It's just like crazy stuff. Really,
Yeah.
really hard to deal with. And the next question would be, well, how do you make players aware of your schedule or understand when you're coaching each player and they're using different calendars, they're using the notes app in the phone to figure out when they have lessons. So it just became a big nightmare for coaches to be able to manage, especially when you get into group-based stuff. Like if you're running a clinic for 6 people, or you want to run a camp, or you want to, run a 4-week training program with women 3-5 to 4-0. So it's something more specific, and it's really difficult to manage. So we did just put all of those tools into one for the coach, so they can go into Bounce, they can set up their calendar on a week by week or month by month basis based on when they're available and at which courts. So many coaches are spending time at multiple courts. They could say, for example, from 9 to 12 on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm free at this location. And then from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. at that location. And that way, when players come in to book directly from their booking page, it's already solved the when and where for them. And then, as you mentioned, when the player purchases the lesson, the payment is handled on Bounce and just goes immediately to the coach's bank account. And then we can also help them with things like, tax reporting at the end of the year as well, which is it's a headache for everybody, but especially independent
Right.
coaches. So yeah, we're trying to give them the all in one tools to be able to run their business and spend more time doing what they want to do, which is providing instruction to players and building relationships.
I love that. And you were saying like obviously, making people aware of their schedules, like where, when they can teach. But I mean, and I want to also get your opinion on where this is going. But you guys are launching online coaching too. Do you think, first, I mean, tell me how that's going to work, and do you think that is the future?
Oh yes, that's the
The
technology
golden
question
question.
indeed. Oh yeah, always. Is it just going to be robots on the court with all the
I know,
virtual
how
coaching? And
scary.
no, I hope not. Um, yeah, so years ago, I used to have certain parts of my lessons recorded or certain parts of matches recorded, and I would submit videos to multiple coaches and say, I'd like your feedback on my decision making during this game, or help me with my technique on my serve and things like that. And it was obviously manual. I would record it, I would download it, send it in an email. They would send back like a their own screen recording, or they would make a Word document to let me know what was going on at each minute when they had feedback. And it's something that we've seen grow. We've had a lot of coaches who have said, I'm doing this manually. I just want to do it in bounce. So we've pretty much as of this morning launched the first version of our remote coaching experience. And the way that works, Caitlin, is you can just enable remote on your coaching page on Bounce, and I can send a video to you directly. You'll receive notification, you'll get the video, and then you'll open it kind of in an experience like this, what you and I are doing. But
Okay.
on one side of the screen, it'll allow you to leave comments, and it will record the timestamp of that comment. And you will say, for example, this is comment about your return. Then you will mark whether it's positive or critical feedback, and then you can leave the actual comment. And you can do that via text, you can write it out, you can leave a voice note that we will also annotate in the text for you. You can add your own video or your own picture, and you can do that down the entire video, whether the player sent you a 2 minute video or an 18-minute video. And then when you're done, you'll just send it right back to the player. It'll show up for them in the same experience where they can watch the video of them playing back. And then it will tell them at each timestamp, freezing the video, what the feedback was then. And this obviously is another way for coaches to grow their impact, because there is a lot of opportunity to provide coaching remotely for things that don't necessarily need to be on court, like, for example, decision making or technique or things like that. But it also gives all the players in a fast growing sport access to coaches they may not otherwise have. Because as you said, it's a pretty nascent market. There are lots and lots of cities that don't have coaches that have been trained yet and certified. So now you can have access to some of the best coaches in the world from your couch. I don't want to say this is uh, the future 100%, because I think the best way to improve at a sport is to go play the sport. But there is a lot of room to improve without being on the court. For example, you mentioned earlier YouTube. I do the same. I binge watch all types of YouTube content, and it's helpful. But the issue with it is it's not personalized. So imagine an experience where that is direct virtual feedback based on a tournament match that I submitted, or me drilling with you together and then sending that to a coach. So we're just trying to give players that extra opportunity, and obviously coaches a way to expand their reach.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I personally love like hands-on coaching where I'm like one-on-one with the person, but where I really could see the virtual coaching working big time is like strategy. Like, let's say even I played this morning and I sent a coach, my match and been like, what could I have done better? Or like you said, like kind of making those notes with the time codes in it and just kind of improving the strategy. I feel like that's where the virtual coaching would really come hand in hand and give you access to people that, maybe don't live like where I live in Nashville, and I get to work with like Lee Whitwell. I know you said she's on your team, and some of the most amazing coaches across the world now. So that's cool to have access to.
Yeah, totally. And it's funny you say strategy, because what we've seen in the beta testing is that players, so when a player submits the video, they can tell the coach specific stuff they want feedback on. I'm looking for feedback on drops and serve, or I'm just looking for general feedback. And often what happens is they're looking for one thing, but the coach ends up giving them feedback on all kinds of stuff that the player didn't know they were doing wrong. So I might have said, I'm looking for feedback on my decision making and like general strategy on my shot selection. Uh, but then when the coach sees the video, they realize that every time I'm at the kitchen, I'm standing up as tall as can be and I'm not moving my feet. So there's all kinds of feedback on you need to get a little bit lower, you need to make sure you're split stepping. And that's just extra value the player might have on stuff they didn't know they were asking for in the first place. So that really helps. And there was something else you said. I forgot. There was something else interesting you said I wanted to address.
Well, yeah, and it's just interesting. Even when I just record a match too, it's like you said with, you're standing straight up the kitchen line or something. It's like things like that you don't even realize you're doing until you're actually recording yourself. So even if, the coaches can pick up on something, but you can even pick up on something just like recording yourself for a purpose too. So
Right.
I think that's where it could really help too. And it's interesting. I mean, you seem like obviously you guys are launching the online coaching now, but obviously you had to think about this ahead of the game to get here. So what kind of like inspired you to start this? You seem very like innovative with your approach and trying to be ahead of the game too in this market.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's nice. I probably the first thing that happened is I really love racket sports. Like I'm just a little bit of a nerd for racket sports first and foremost. I don't really have a preference for which one. I think a lot of the persona, the type of person who ends up falling in love with racket sports, I think is quite similar, regardless of which one it is, and that
Yes.
includes squash and badminton and some of the things like that. So first and foremost, I do have a pretty strong drive to just want to share the game with more people. And then after that, it really came out of frustration for how poor the experiences can be for uh, looking for a coach and being able to document all the stuff I've learned. But I also got to do quite a bit of suffering on the coaching side of my own. I coached when I was in college. I coached high school tennis, and I did a lot of privates and um, camps and clinics. And I was always frustrated with all the stuff I mentioned earlier, from the business side all the way to I've been coaching this kid for 3 years. Why don't I have one place where all of that information lives so we can see how the development journey's been, aside from like pen and paper? It's this is crazy. And then after that, it's just been having the opportunity to work with a lot of cool coaches in the space who really help us to drive some of the innovation that we're doing. We just kind of listen to what they want improved and where they think the market's going, and we just commit to building the best tools for them. And luckily, we've landed on something I think that's become valuable.
Definitely. And do you guys work with like specific facilities or is it just kind of like independent coaches all over?
So far, it's almost all independent coaches, even if they are employed at a facility. Right
Got it.
now, we're kind of going into the next step in the partnership side and trying to work with a lot of the technology companies that do work with the clubs. So, for example, one of the important parts about getting the remote coaching right, and even some of the in-person lessons in the future as well, is video. How do you make it really easy for players and coaches to get video? So we're currently working on a couple of integrations with two of the leading camera companies. I might not mention them just yet, just so
Yeah.
that if you are a player playing in a club that is hooked up to these cameras, when you finish playing, that video will immediately go to your Bounce account as well, and you could just say submit minute 5 to minute 18. Those 13 minutes submit to Coach Lee Whitwell for feedback, and it will be seamless. So I think through those partnerships, we'll be able to go directly to the clubs a little bit more and support the players who frequent those clubs and the coaches who are providing lessons as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And what's cool about Bounce too is we were just talking, like, I was like, I'll be home for the holidays. Like, I'm from New York, but I'm not that familiar with the pickleball scene in New York. So, your platform also, enables people to use a database, right, to find courts wherever you may be traveling to or even, live at.
Correct. So at the very beginning, one of the things we wanted to address while we were figuring out the coaching side is how do we make pickleball more accessible? As you said, like the first thing people ask is what are the rules of this sport and then where can I play? So we've partnered with all kinds of companies, and now a lot of it is kind of collective intelligence of players on the ground to build a huge database of courts. And we try to keep that up to date so that no matter where you're going, you can open bounce and you can see the courts near you. Are they dedicated pickleball courts? Are they tennis courts where you can put down your own lines and net? Are they private? Are they public? Is it membership only? Is it part of a gym like a Lifetime Fitness or something? And we did the same for tournaments. So we partner with pickleball brackets to where you can find any pickleball brackets tournament directly from Bounce. The discoverability experience is unique on Bounce, I think. And then when you find a tournament you want, we'll just send you back to brackets to register, but you can still find everything you need directly from the platform because, as I said, we really want to focus on accessibility of the sport first and foremost.
That's awesome. And does it kind of track like your performance, I guess, like at practice or like at tournaments? Like, does it kind of track your progress with how you're doing with those types of events?
Working on it. That's what we
Okay.
want. We'd love to be able to like you're ahead of the game. We'd love to be able to show you all of your tournament data over time and then link that with, coaches or lessons or even like drills that you could be working on based on performance. And we could even, if we could figure out a way to make sure all the tournaments are happening in places where there are cameras and it's being recorded, you could merge everything. And even, if we're playing like mix 5-0 together, we would be able to tell that Ryan made way more unforced errors. And it
Okay.
could be on a specific shot. And then we could suggest drills for Caitlin and Ryan to do with or without a coach. So we're trying to work to make it that integrated, but it'll take a little bit of time.
Yeah, no, that would be amazing to have. And I know you guys have like a great, team of coaches. Is there one in particular or a few that you've actually had the opportunity to learn a lot from?
Oh, that's a
I kind
good
of put you
one.
on the spot there. I know you have a great team, so.
No, that's actually a good question because I have the opportunity to work with a lot. I mean, I've probably learned the most through Lee, as we mentioned earlier, both directly and
Yeah.
indirectly because I consume a lot of the content. And next would probably be Matt Paingasser, who founded Quattro Pickleball. So this is a really, really robust, up and coming, like coaching upskilling organization. So he works with coaches to help them to understand how to teach better. And he's phenomenal. I actually think him and Lee do a lot of work together on the curriculum
Okay.
side. So a lot of that has been remotely and virtual, which has inspired a little bit what we're doing at Balance. But I'll have to give those two the shout out.
And since you started Bounce, what have you seen in terms of growth with just people, I guess the number of coaches you've had and just kind of the number of people like signing up to wanting to actually get that type of feedback?
Yeah, good question. So it's been massive. I think with everything pickleball, we have every single month for about 18 months since we launched the first part, which was the court finder. We have increasing traffic month over month of people looking for courts, which I think is the best indicator because that's like our general interest indicator. How many new people are coming into pickleball? It's growing quickly, but I think there's still a lot more room for growth as a sport. Obviously, there's an increasing number of players interested in tournaments, and I think this is important as well, because as you mentioned rightfully at the beginning of the call, compared to other racket sports, far fewer players seek lessons right now in pickleball because it's a little bit more social and community driven. But as the sport matures, you get more players who say, I want to go play tournaments and become a 4-0 or a 4-5 or a 5-0. So I think us seeing a lot more traffic on tournament pages is a good indication of that. And yeah, we just put the coaching platform into the market in July, and now we have more than 400 coaches using it every day. And then I think now with remote, we'll start to see a lot more significant growth. And this is, I think, the most refreshing thing about that is it's been largely word of mouth. We haven't really committed much to marketing. We've tried to make sure to figure out the product to build something valuable. So happy with the growth, but hopefully once remotes launch, we can start transitioning to spread the word more and get it in the hands of more coaches and players, and then see more growth.
And what about like the demographics? Like I was in PPA Atlanta a few weeks ago, and it was so cute, like seeing all the little junior clinics and like young kids running around. And I swear, when I was doing that like a year ago, I barely saw any kids. So are you seeing, and I'm sure as it becomes, I know it's like in college clubs and some high schools have little like clubs and organizations where they
Mhm.
run some pickleball things, but are you seeing more younger people, kind of engage in the coaching platform?
Without question, this has been one of the biggest changes since we got started about 2 years ago. We've seen one, what you said, which is a lot more clinics and camps aimed at the younger demographic, middle school kids, high school kids, things like that. We also have had the opportunity to support high school clubs. So these kids that are really entrepreneurial and say, I'm just going to start my own pickleball club at the school. I would like to be able to run practices, and we have a cool little um, round robin builder inside of Bounce. It's really, really easy. You can just share a link. People will sign up. It'll put them on teams, set the schedule of play, do court assignments. You just click
Oh,
and go, and it's free. So it's really good for the kids to use. And then where we've seen the most growth in a young demographic is actually in the college space. So obviously, Duper has done a fantastic job getting more of the competitive play into the universities. And now we have a lot more of them using Bounce to run their round robins, get their community organized, and then, as we said, many of them who want to get better are seeking coaching. So you see coaches coming in and being able to spend a lot more time with 18 to 22-year olds, whereas 2 years ago when Bounce got started, it did skew a little bit older, right? As most people thought pickleball did, but it's changing rapidly.
it really is. It's crazy to see. I remember I like saw the sport several years ago in Florida with my mom, and I saw a bunch of like elderly people playing, and I was like, what is that? That like, I
Right,
don't know. I was like, that doesn't look that fun. And then sure
right.
enough, during COVID, I tried it and I'm like addicted now. So
Only
it's
takes 15
crazy.
minutes and
I
that's it.
know.
You can get hooked. But Dan,
Lit
did you play a lot of tennis before pickleball? Like I'm actually curious how you got to like a 5-0 so fast without, as you said, taking many lessons.
Yeah, I played tennis, like varsity tennis all throughout high school, but I actually rode crew in college at
Cool.
UCLA. So I kind of stopped tennis for quite a bit into college, picked it up a little bit again after, but no, I actually wasn't even the best. I started in North Carolina and I like wasn't even, I mean, maybe I was one of the best, but just so recreationally played like once a week. And then it was when I moved to Nashville that I just like started drilling. I had some people here that were like ahead of it and like had been playing for a few years. So they're like, let's take the tennis game out of your pickleball game, and kind of forced me to learn the slow game pretty
Right.
quickly into my journey in pickleball. So I think that's where, and then I got addicted. So now I'm playing like 5 days a week. I try to
Wow.
drill as much and I try to play in tournaments. But um, that's
Cool.
kind of how I feel like I've just had kind of good like mentors here.
Sure.
But yeah, I've taken like one lesson, I think, with one of the pros that was in town, like a 3 and me. But that's one of the things too. Like, I just feel like I've kind of plateaued as well. Like, I was like, I'd like to, I don't know, be like a stronger player, maybe with some strategy and stuff. So, I could use
Sure.
balance to improve
Sure.
a little
To find what
bit.
if you play 5 days a week, how do you split the time? Like how much of it is competitive, how much of it is drilling, how much of it is just open play with other good players?
So I never do open play anymore. It's all scheduled matches,
Okay.
just to kind of stay consistent with the level. I was going back and forth, and it kind of messed me up a little bit. I'll play with my mom and family sometimes when I go home, but consistently here it's scheduled matches. So I'd say that's like 4 days a week, and then one day a week is drilling. It should probably be a little bit more, but it's hard to designate
Sure.
that time to drilling.
Yeah, sure. No, I understand. That's interesting. What drove the decision to spend less time in open play? It's because you're like really committed to getting better and it's kind of like your competitive outlet.
Yeah, someone here told me like you should really just be playing with people at your level if you want to get
Mm,
better, like at or above your level actually. And so we have a really strong squad of people that consistently play 5-0 tournaments. So I've just been trying to like stay with those people and practice because I feel like I have a strong forehand drive. And so if I'm even playing like that with a 4-5 player, it's going to work. But against a
right.
5-0 player, it might not necessarily work. So it's like just kind of working on the finesse, the strategy, and just more of the consistent slowing the pace down. It's kind of helped me because if I go back to a little bit of a lower play, I can get away with
Sure.
being playing my fast game, which comes from my tennis game. So,
Right. Right. Yeah, no, you need to definitely got to put yourself in a position where that stuff won't fly anymore. That's the best way to change.
or even dropping, if you're dropping it a little bit high or far, I could get away with it. I can still make my way up to the kitchen. However, if you're playing against a 5-0, I mean, they're gonna
Yeah.
slam it deep back. So,
Right.
just to be prepared for that, it's helped me. But I'm open to playing with whomever. I love the sport, but on a more consistent basis, I try to keep it pretty consistent with that level.
Sure. No, I agree. I don't get to play quite as much at the moment, but when I do, I'd prefer it to be a little bit more like drill or competitive oriented with better
Yes.
players. Yeah.
Yeah. And Ryan, just one last thing before we go. If someone wants to sign up either as a user of Bounce or a coach, how do they do that?
Yes, so right now the entire app runs through bounce.game, GAME. We will uh, make native apps pretty soon, probably going into the end of the year, but you can just go onto Bounce, create an account as a player or a coach. It's totally free for both. We don't have any subscription costs. We just have a small transaction fee if you want to do remote lessons. Otherwise, everything else is free, and we'd love to have you in the community.
Yeah, I love that. Well, awesome. Ryan, such a great platform you have. Thank you so much for joining us and stay tuned to see who will join us in the kitchen next time.